So, welcome again for the Hallmark Academy. I am proud to present you my mentor and my teacher, Dr. Salil Bendre. He is the head of pulmonary medicine in Nanavati Super Specialty Hospital, and he has also been the ex-professor and head of pulmonology in KJ Somaiya Medical College. He has been a guide to most of the students in for who have been registered for DNB programs, as well as he has done diploma in allergy and immunology in Indian Institute of Allergy and Immunology in New Delhi. So I'm glad to present you the my sir, actually I would say that, Dr. Salil Bendre, who has taught me, and I am glad to have you, sir.
Thank you so much, and a very warm welcome and a good afternoon to all of you. So, on behalf of Vocard, firstly, I would like at the outset thank them for organizing this webinar so that I can interact with you and discuss with you certain interesting aspects about management of cough. Cough being a very inherent complaint of all our patients having respiratory diseases. So we will just go slowly about how to move about with the learning objectives of cough to make a strong case for individualizing therapy in the management of cough in COPD via case-based discussion. So it's a novel technique where we are going to discuss certain case history correlated with the treatment plan which we are going to offer and come to some basic idea, because I am certain cough is a very subjective complaint and each clinician approaches it perhaps with a different ball game or a different plan of action. So we'll move on with the main topic of today, which is COPD and chronic cough in COPD. As we all know, COPD is not a new disease at all, but though it's not a new disease, the mortality because of COPD is definitely on the rise. And the symptomatology of COPD, as you all very well know, is characterized by exertional breathlessness and cough. So the basic symptom which we always expect from a patient of chronic bronchitis would be cough with extensive amounts of expectoration, which is going on for few months, for many years. And we know that the primary cause of COPD in most of our patients is smoking. Of course, now we have got an entity called as non-smoking COPD, but there are certain studies which have been put up, as you can see in the slide which is displayed, that cough is significantly prevalent among current smokers and increasing cigarette consumption is associated with higher cough frequency. So if you can see the time chronology of cough, much more in the waking hours, which of course our patients do present with these complaints that they get a lot of cough in the early hours of the morning. In the day it becomes a little less, and night while sleeping it may become less, again increase throughout the night, and much more in the early part of the day. So that is how the chronology of cough happens in our patients of COPD, and we all know why it happens. It is primarily the stagnation of secretions and the postural movements which later on happens when we wake up, and the expectoration. Very often I have got patients who say when they wake up, they spend at least 10 to 15 minutes just having a lot of expectoration. And after the expectoration is done, then they feel better and then they can get ready for work. So a life of a patient of COPD is very difficult, especially in the early hours of the working day. And there are, of course, as clinicians, as doctors, we have got certain elements which we know which can actually predict the lung function decline in these individuals. So talking only of symptoms in terms of exertional breathlessness and cough and correlating it with the airflow obstruction which can be present in smokers and which increases in smokers, causing a systematic decline of the lung functions. So as you can see in this present slide, as predictors of lung function decline in the general population amongst people who smoke and the people having cough. So presence of chronic cough and sputum doubled the risk of COPD in those with normal lung functions over a long term. So this is a very, very important fact which we need to understand. So when we do our PFT in these patients and they are having cough, we can actually predict how much is the decline going to be and how are they going to respond to the treatment. Which of course brings us to the very, very important aspect of a doctor to patient relation, because the patient is going to ask you, when is he going to be better? Is his quality of life going to improve? So we have to have some kind of an objective assessment of it, by which we can see in this the objective and subjective cough data collected from COPD current smokers, COPD ex-smokers, healthy smokers and healthy non-smokers. So if you go to see the conclusion which is highlighted here, the cough related quality of life was worsened by both the presence of COPD and current smoking. So definitely the current smokers of course are at a higher risk of symptomatic deterioration and the ex-smokers. When we are talking of cough, please remember that during our working day, during office hours, it becomes very difficult and embarrassing for a patient to have constant cough and expectoration, which also becomes a part of their quality of life in society. So when they come to us, it is not for us to label them as COPD and put a full stop to it. It is for us to understand how to manage them so that they have a better quality of life. And the first requirement of a patient from a doctor may not be the cure. The first requirement may not be the cure. Rather, the first requirement is symptomatic relief. We may label it, we may investigate it, we may treat it. But what is wanted and warranted by the patient at the first OPD meeting is symptomatic relief. So we'll come to that slowly as we evolve through this slide presentation. Now there are important comorbidities as a cause of cough in a patient of COPD. And I was just before starting this, we were just going through certain points which we may have to talk about, and one was hyperacidity. Someone had inquired about hyperacidity and gastroesophageal reflux. So it is definitely a proved comorbidity in patients with COPD. In fact, it is so often seen that a patient comes to a doctor for cough and the only reason actually later on is found out to be reflux. And that is found out much later, because obviously we go through the paraphernalia of investigating, of doing a X-ray, of doing a CT scan, maybe a PFT, and treating him, and then we perhaps come to a proper history taking at that point of time, where we understand it is the reflux which was precipitating the cough. So you imagine that a patient has COPD and he has a reflux. So his symptomatology is going to be much worse than a person not having reflux. Plus, we all very well know now that COPD patients very often have lung infections, which we call as exacerbations. Every infection damages the lung. This damage is in the form of fibrous tissue, in the form of lung getting destroyed. And once it is destroyed, it forms cystic changes, which comes to the next part, which is bronchiectasis. So we can very well see on the slide that a very important aspect of comorbidity is not only reflux but also bronchiectasis. If you are treating COPD patient for 10 years, please do not label them only as COPD in the 11th year also, because by that time they could have developed bronchiectasis because of repeated infections, and the treatment plan may somewhat alter because there are two diseases now in that particular individual: laryngopharyngeal reflux. So these different points we need to consider when you plan the treatment. Post-viral infections, sinusitis, seasonal allergies. So when we say these complaints, please understand a COPD patient having an occupation where he is exposed to a lot of dusty environment itself is a big deterrent to his cough. So you may be prescribing the correct inhalers, you may be prescribing the correct antibiotics, but without realizing that it's actually the occupation or the environmental factors which are exacerbating his cough. So please remember that these factors are to be considered when you treat a patient of COPD. So with that background, we now proceed to a case which is a very real-time scenario which you and me come across when we treat a patient. The patient is basically a 58-year-old gentleman presenting to our clinic, our OPD, with shortness of breath. He has also got cough with productive but mucoid sputum, and it's more severe and more intense in the morning. And owing to the severe cough, he of course had to take frequent break in his work. Chest discomfort, throat irritation, rhinorrhea is accompanying it, and there is audible wheeze. So this is a typical patient who presents with a lower respiratory inflammatory airway disease. There is wheezing, means there is airway obstruction. There is extensive mucus production, means there is an involvement of the bronchial mucus glands. There is breathlessness, implies there is a ventilation perfusion mismatch. So if you put physiology, pathology and symptomatology together, then we come to a diagnosis of chronic obstructive lung disease. He has got a past history of hypertension. He has got this past history of cough going on recurrently with exacerbations for almost last 3 years. Intermittently, there is an increase in the severity of the cough and breathlessness. However, the breathlessness has increased since the last 1 year. So when we talk about the onset, duration and progress, there is definitive change in his pattern of breathlessness and change in the pattern of his cough. No family history of any lung disease, and he's a taxi driver. So again, an element of air pollution induced diseases affecting the lung. He's been a chronic smoker for last 35 years. So we got two factors which are risk factors. One is he's a smoker, he's a taxi driver. Comorbidity is a hypertensive, and he's presenting with repeated history of cough with exacerbation. On clinical examination, we find that his pulse is normal, respiratory rate is more, it is 28, blood pressure is normal, saturation is 95%. He's got wheezing. So wheezing, of course, as we all know, it indicates airway obstruction, airway narrowing. So the rhonchi are commemorating that there is a airway narrowing going on, a luminal narrowing going on. And we see an X-ray. X-ray is typically showing flattened domes of diaphragm. We got flattened domes of diaphragm, hyperinflated lungs. Now in this particular patient, the basic issue is that the diaphragmatic mobility is much lesser. So if the diaphragmatic mobility is lesser, naturally he is going to have significant amount of airway obstruction. His lungs are not going to inflate. So there is a combination of restrictive as well as obstructive airway disease, which on a lung function test will be checked up as a combined defect. Now, when we use bronchodilators in this patient, we obviously are aware that the diaphragms will not be anyway be helped. So comes the role of what we call as pulmonary rehabilitation. So pulmonary rehabilitation is an inherent part of our treatment strategy for COPD, because we are taking care, we have to take care of the respiratory muscles, the thoracic cage and the diaphragm. Only when we put all these three together along with the medical strategy, then it will fully complete the prescription of treatment of a COPD patient. A pulmonary function test showed in this person a FEV1 by FVC ratio of 62, which is pointing towards airway obstruction. A FEV1 was 62. Post bronchodilator FEV1 was also 64. So there is not a significant reversibility in this particular patient's lung function test. Also the FVC was 63%. So very typically and characteristic combined defect with a low FVC, low FEV1 by FVC and poor reversibility. On clinical examination, the cricosternal distance is reduced indicating hyperinflation. There is barrel-shaped chest, decreased chest expansion, hyperresonant note, and expiratory rhonchi. So we are now seeing this patient who is a elderly gentleman coming with airway obstruction, repeated episodes of cough and breathlessness, X-ray suggestive of hyperinflation, a pulmonary function test suggestive of a combined respiratory airway disease, restrictive as well as obstructive, with poor reversibility. And clinically, there is evidence of airway obstruction with air trapping. So we use the word air trapping because of which there is hyperinflation and a hyper resonant note. And also we have noted that on X-ray the diaphragms were flattened and there is air trapping. So with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all these 5 aspects, we need to now plan the treatment when the patient comes to us. So of course he was being diagnosed as a COPD and with an exacerbation, but since it is mucoid exacerbation, we are not going to be considering to add an antibiotic. The first advice which we always have to carry out throughout will be to him to quit smoking. If we write all the bronchodilators, the inhalers, the treatment, but we do not insist on that he should quit smoking, then of course his PFT is going to show a decline as gradually as it's going to continue. Nasal oxygen supplementation is a must naturally because the work of breathing of such patients is very high. There is a significant work of breathing going on and the oxygen demand is increasing. So when they are resting, they may not be tachypnic, but the moment he walks, the moment he climbs stairs, the moment he even goes to the washroom, he will start feeling breathless. So a patient coming to us, he is tachypnic, he is wheezing, we have to start the patient on nasal oxygen. And our goal will not be to maintain an oxygen saturation of 98 or 99 because we very well know that a chronic obstructive lung disease patient tends to have a saturation which is low. If we try to overcorrect the saturation, the carbon dioxide retention will start. So we give him an oxygen supplement to maintain it between 90 to 93%, not more than that. In such a situation, a very essential test will be actually to do a arterial blood gas, because an arterial blood gas is not going to only help us in knowing the saturation and the oxygen, but it is going to be more informative in telling us about the carbon dioxide and the pH of that arterial blood gas. Higher the carbon dioxide, more the chances that he will go into respiratory failure, and there is the possibility that he may have to be put on a non-invasive ventilation treatment, NIV. It could be either a CPAP or a BiPAP. But in this gentleman, on giving nasal oxygen, the saturation was maintained and he was prescribed the levosalbutamol, ambroxol, guaifenesin combination twice a day, a salmeterol plus fluticasone meter dose inhaler through a spacer. If we just insist on an inhaler without a spacer, again that will fall short because the deposition of the medication would be much lesser if he uses only a inhaler. So please insist in our COPD patients to use a spacer. The additional part is the anticholinergic, because as we all know, the guidelines definitely suggest the use and the utility of a long-acting anticholinergic bronchodilator. Like in this case, we use a tiotropium inhaler through a spacer. Now, such a patient can be given an option of hospitalization if it is clinically indicated. But this gentleman was ready to take only the oxygen at home and continued on the prescribed medication, of course under a close monitoring with a follow-up on a alternate day basis. He was also advised physiotherapy, which is very essential, since the problem in such patients is not only the narrowing but also the mucus impaction. It is also the viscid mucus, and we know that all our COPD patients lose lot of proteins in the expectorate, and because of which there is an added toll on their proteins, the muscle proteins. So difficulty in expectoration, difficulty in coughing out the viscid sputum, it all leads to muscle fatigue and more carbon dioxide retention. So in such a patient, please understand that we have to use a spacer by default. You need to use it unless of course he has a nebulizer at home. That's an option which can be attempted. But we need to also have physiotherapy and postural drainage. He has to be taught what exactly is the meaning of postural drainage. So it's not just saying that you do breathing exercises. Don't leave it a loose end. He has to be taught a physiotherapy protocol, which ideally in my practice I involve one of the family members to supervise if the patient is doing it religiously, and not only religiously but correctly. A physiotherapist will always be the best person to actually guide in these maneuvers. So postural variation, postural drainage, chest physiotherapy. Never to forget the use of vaccinations in terms of maintaining these patients. So influenza vaccine and pneumococcal vaccine. As we all know, influenza vaccine yearly, and if we are using a polyvalent vaccine or pneumococcal vaccine, then the duration, like example, would be once a year for a Prevnar vaccine. So there is this kind of a plan of management which we need to put up. Last but not the least, and a very essential part of this treatment plan would be the diet. If we do not insist on a high protein, low carbohydrate diet, we are leaving the treatment say 70%. We are not completing it to 100%. So these patients need follow-up. They need psychological support. They are very often going into depression, anxiety, frustration. Because why a person wants to be healthy? Because he does not want to be dependent on others. Whereas a patient like a COPD is going to become dependent on others. Even if we try to take a deep breath and not exhale for more than a minute or two, we will feel short of breath, we will feel claustrophobic, congested. So a COPD patient is living his life throughout in that scenario. So please understand, though COPD is common, though it is well known that smokers develop COPD, yet lung function testing is not as often advised as it should be. Spacers are not as often used as they should be. Even anticholinergic inhalers are not as often used as they should be. And so also for symptomatic relief, even the oral formulations of cough expectorants and bronchodilators are not used as much they should be. And therein lies the catch, because these COPD patients tend to go from one doctor to another, and finally they will land up with the sixth doctor who probably envelopes all the points which we just now charted out. So we have a huge burden of COPD with us, and we as good and wise clinicians have to apply all the knowledge we have to see to it that our patients don't go into that stage of becoming dependent and becoming closer to the end of life. So we have around 6.5 to 7.7% estimated prevalence of COPD in India. Worldwide prevalence of spirometry defined COPD is almost 10%, which is a huge chunk of population if we see the world over. And COPD will be the third leading cause of death worldwide in 2020. So it's like we know COPD. In fact, that's perhaps a very, very common disease, but we haven't been able to check on it. We haven't been able to stop it. We haven't been able to break it down to stop it where it is. And we, my friends, are the ones who are going to play a very, very significant role in preventing its progression. So you will have to be the psychiatrist of the patient, you will have to be the dietitian of that patient, you will have to be the physiotherapist of that patient, in addition to being a chest physician of that patient. And we have to see to it that the estimated age, death rate and everything are well in control compared to what is happening all around us. So smoking, again, it's such a rampant problem, and a lot of smoking de-addiction techniques have been used. So many are in vogue, everyone knows about it, everything is on Google. And a lot of patients are aware that smoking is bad for their health. Yet, do they give up smoking? Many of them don't. So we perhaps have to devise our own ways of counseling them. And the first step in devising one own way in giving up smoking or helping him quit smoking is to find time to be devoted to that patient. So we have got prevalence of smoking associated COPD in India, China and Japan. You can see India is leading, of course, which is not a good element because these are the main. In fact, today the youth is seen to be a very, very strong part of the population which is involved with smoking, and it's in almost in equal ratio, the male is to female ratio. BDs, cigarettes, even hookah, which is one of the ways of inhaling smoke, is also considered to be a crucial detrimental factor towards lung diseases. Exposure to the environmental tobacco smoke. So there is active smoking, there is passive smoking, there is a third hand smoke. So there is a lot of different science which is now evolving regarding smoke and its problems towards the lung disease. The commonest problem is of course COPD. Next would be of course a malignancy, which is all know that a squamous cell carcinoma of the lung is one of the outcomes of smoking in our patients. So lifelong smokers have a 50% probability of developing COPD during their lifetime. So please remember that your prescription has to have physiotherapy, vaccination, inhalers, a cough formulation, and a very, very important is counseling towards quitting smoking. The progressive decline in lung function is a hallmark of COPD patient, and so we have got a curve which actually measures how much is the fall in the FEV1 over a period of years, 25 years, 50 years and 75 years. So the rate of decline in FEV1 increases with increasing COPD severity. The absolute value of FEV1 decline is greater in patients with moderate disease compared with those with more COPD. So we have got a very properly documented idea about what can be offered. Now there was one question as to, apart from bronchodilators, can we do anything else for our COPD patients? So as I have summarized some time back, please remember diet, pulmonary rehabilitation. Many centers don't have a proper pulmonary rehabilitation protocol. We should develop it. We should have a discussion. We should perhaps do a 6-minute walk test, find out the compliance of these patients, do a regular spirometry to understand are they improving, and then plan the outcome of the therapy which we are giving. So early COPD and decline in FEV1, rate of annual decline in FEV1 with mild to very severe COPD randomized in the placebo arm of large interventional studies. So what is the conclusion of this? This is that the rate of FEV1 decline has been shown to be greater in earlier versus the later stages of the disease. So I get patients who say, I smoke 10 cigarettes but I jog for 5 kilometers. I get patients who say, whenever I go for a party and I smoke, the next day I see to it that I do double the exercise. They feel it's neutralizing whatever pollutants they have inhaled. So there are vague explanations which are available amongst the patient because they have to justify why they are smoking. However, we should be still persistent and insistent that this is not the right way. One more problem which I have seen with my patients is that, sir, we are getting stressed. Because of stress I smoke. Now stress is a very, very non-specific word. Even the 5th standard child is stressed. And even a teenager is stressed. And even an elderly gentleman is stressed. So because of stress I have to smoke. So we have to deal with a lot of different patients and scenarios. So please insist on the correct methods of de-addiction and initial diagnosis of COPD. To summarize, breathlessness, chronic cough. Please don't mix up or try to understand about interstitial lung disease and COPD. Though they both will present with cough and breathlessness, but interstitial lung disease primarily have a dry cough, whereas chronic bronchitis patients always will have wet cough because this disease is in the mucus glands in the bronchi. There could be a overlap in certain patients of emphysema, means they do have dry cough more or less with exertional breathlessness, but we can clinically very well differentiate it. Plus X-ray is always going to be there. The age of the patient, usually ILD would be in the middle age to elderly. Female patients are more common seen with interstitial lung disease. So there is no question of confusing it, but just to keep it as a differential diagnosis. And then there are different scores which can actually help you in grading the severity of COPD. And we know that there is the guidelines which are going to make it into A, B, C, and D as the groups of COPD. The GOLD guideline recommends the classification of patient based on a combination of symptoms and risk of exacerbation. So it's a mixture of symptomatological deterioration combined with the dyspnea score as well as the change in the PFT. So these will definitely guide you in deciding about the treatment plan which you are going to advise your patient. One more thing as a part of this workup which is not enlisted here is a 2D echo. Please remember that you need to check the pulmonary hypertension as well as the ejection fraction in these patients. Very often they are middle-aged to elderly gentlemen who are hypertensive or diabetics, and also they have got cardiac element as well as a lung element which are contributing towards exertional breathlessness. So chest X-ray, a lung volume study, arterial blood gas, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency rarely, exercise testing. So these would be the, just to complete the theoretical aspect. Of course, I would insist on doing an X-ray, a lung function test, a ABG and a 2D echo. They are very, very important tests to understand the physiological deterioration or to monitor the progress of your treatment which you are planning for this patient. Please remember at the baseline is that he needs symptomatic relief. Just by explaining to him the pathology does not mean that the patient is going to be understanding everything and going back. He needs to have some symptomatic relief, and these patients are primarily upset with cough and expectoration. I definitely insist, or I use, whenever there is a lot of expectoration, I do use cough expectorants and bronchodilators because they have got tremendous change in the symptomatology of these patients. Along with, we can use even acetylcysteine as a mucolytic agent, but ambroxol being easy and safe and available, it is one of the best mucolytic agents when combined with an expectorant and a bronchodilator. So we have got certain differential diagnoses which may coexist with COPD. For example, bronchiectasis can coexist with COPD. Bronchiolitis can coexist with COPD. Asthma, we should not be in a position to confuse it because the history of asthma is completely different. It is acute attacks, repeated attacks. In between, the patient is asymptomatic, so periods of normalcy are existent in a patient with an asthmatic. A bronchiectatic patient will have a predisposing history like tuberculosis or a pneumonia, and then he has developed bronchiectasis. Of course, at times we may have a patient of COPD with exacerbation, but that is because of congestive cardiac failure. He's got into failure, and because of which he came with breathlessness. Need not be that there is an infective exacerbation. So not every patient of COPD who comes to you has to have an exacerbation. There could be a cardiac failure as a cause of his increased breathlessness in your known case of COPD. So please keep your eyes open to even cardiac complications which may occur in these patients. A known case of COPD patient may develop reactivation of tuberculosis. It happens that we see a patient of COPD for 6 years. Next time he comes to us, we again feel, oh, this is all exacerbation, start him on an antibiotic. And that time perhaps we don't do an X-ray. Because you know this patient, he is an ex-smoker, he is a COPD patient, he has come with an exacerbation. So we start him on medications and antibiotics, again he comes back. But we did not take an X-ray at that point of time. Perhaps taking an X-ray would have shown an infiltrate or a cavity which wasn't there in the previous X-ray. So every patient of COPD with an exacerbation may come because of a cause other than COPD itself. So please keep your eyes open regarding that. And there are the non-pharmacological management of COPD, which we have already talked about, which is also included in the GOLD guidelines. The smoking cessation being inherent, pulmonary rehabilitation very, very, very important because we need to have a limb exercises, upper limb exercises for this patient, even core exercise, because that's what matters. It will be his quality of life which will improve in such a scenario. Yoga is one of the best forms of breathing exercises if done regularly and correctly in under supervision of some yoga teacher. So the guidelines as far as the pharmacology is concerned, we very well know that the focus in a patient of COPD is on anticholinergic bronchodilators. and now we have got a LAMA with a LABA, we got a ultra LAMA with a ultra LABA. So there are various combination therapies available. Though guidelines are merely to guide, the best prescription is the one which you feel is correct for your patient. So there is a controversy, should we use inhaled corticosteroids in a COPD patient? Now in an exacerbation, yes, we need to use an anti-inflammatory, but once the acute inflammatory episode has settled down, it's controlled, you may actually continue them back only on a LAMA and a LABA. So these few ideas we should have when we think about managing our patient of COPD with inhalers. With every follow-up, we need to check the technique of the inhalation. In my own clinic, I have seen that 40% of the patients either do not take it properly, or they forget to take it, or they miss a dose, or they feel now I am better so I will stop it. Variations are always going to be there. So we need to insist on the delivery technique, whether he is doing it correctly or properly or not. So please don't estimate that this patient will perhaps do it correctly. So bronchodilatory cough formulations for managing cough in COPD patient, a very important topic. So we got mucolytics and ambroxol. Definitely we need to use it. A bronchodilator. The best bronchodilator and the simplest bronchodilator which I and you have used is salbutamol. And now we have got levosalbutamol, which is safer and more efficacious, and guaifenesin as an expectorant. So if I have a patient who's got cough, expectoration, viscid sputum, getting exhausted with his cough, I would definitely be using a cough formulation combined with a bronchodilators, inhaled therapy, and once the symptoms are controlled, withdraw the cough expectoration and continue only the inhaled bronchodilators. So we are dealing with cough, bronchospasm, excessive mucus production, and which all gives rise to a particular combination of symptoms, which is obstructive airway disease. So this is how we will be formulating and planning our treatment. And clinical utility of bronchodilator cough syrup formulations containing levosalbutamol have been studied and have been observed over a period of time in chronic as well as in acute cough cases. So the cough severity score assessed by Fissman scale showed a significant improvement by 72% for chronic cases and 76% for acute cases. Certain questions come up, if it's a chronic disease, what's the role of expectorant and a bronchodilator? But I feel it's the symptomatic relief, the ability for the mucus to come out easily, which will definitely prevent recurrent stagnation of secretions and recurrent exacerbations of infection. So patient's preference of bronchodilator cough formulations containing levosalbutamol. So we got levosalbutamol as well as salbutamol based. So bronchodilatory cough formulations containing a fixed dose combination of bronchodilator with mucolytics and or expectorants remain as safe and as effective options for adults with COPD. That is the bottom line. And patients expressing extremely or very satisfied with therapy is actually a certificate to the doctor that the treatment is working well. Remember, here we are talking of an acute symptomatic relief as well as maintenance therapy. So we have to combine it judiciously and wisely. And of course, with your own confidence that this is going to help or not help. So try to mix up together, and perhaps we can then summarize that it is the main symptom of our COPD patient is cough, especially the chronic bronchitis patients. Cough, exhaustive cough with lot of viscid expectoration, because of which they get tired. The chronic cough and the expectoration, it increases during every exacerbation as well as in the early mornings. With every exacerbation, there is a decline in the lung function test, and with every mucus impaction, there is a significant chance of fibrosis and pushing him towards pneumonia and bronchiectasis. So significant proportion of caregivers, patients preferred levosalbutamol based bronchodilatory cough formulation over salbutamol based bronchodilator cough formulation for cough management. So which is a very significant observation for all of us, and we need such combinations where we have a mucolytic and an expectorant. We should of course avoid any kind of a cough suppressant in such cases because we want the secretions to be cleared up. Better the clearance, better will the patient be and lesser the amount of exacerbations. So if I put it all together, then the first thing is, of course, as always, our teachers have been teaching us history taking is very important. Once you have a history of an elderly gentleman, ex-smoker, occupational dust exposure, please consider chronic obstructive lung disease if the history is for a longer duration, maybe more than 2 years. If it is with significant expectoration, then our first possibility becomes chronic bronchitis. And a lung function test is required. X-ray chest is a must. 2D echo is a requirement because we need to see the pulmonary pressures as well. And clinical assessment in terms of saturation, arterial blood gas will tell you the hypoxia as well as the carbon dioxide status. Once we have this, then comes the plan of treatment, and that would be in terms of inhalation, a bronchodilator, an anticholinergic bronchodilator, a expectorant bronchodilator mucolytic combination, and antibiotic if there is an infective exacerbation, and then subsequently add physiotherapy, postural drainage, nutrition, high protein diet, low carbohydrate diet, not to forget vaccination, pneumonia vaccination, influenza vaccination. In many of these patients who develop pulmonary hypertension and cor pulmonale, even fluid restriction is going to prevent a lot of patients from coming to the ICU with fluid overload. So I think this would be the best way and plan to go ahead with managing our patients of COPD. Thank you very much for your patient hearing and audience. I am sure there are questions which are going to be coming to me, and I would be more than happy to address them if there are any queries. I think one or two questions have already come up about what about those patients who have intractable cough not responding to routine cough syrups, and we see these patients very often. And let me tell you, I have got these last few weeks, I have seen patients who come with intractable cough and they have this cough coming in spasms, doesn't stop quickly, dry irritating cough. Many of them do respond even to inhaled steroids, inhaled bronchodilators, because the process, the pathology is the same which happens in a inflammatory airway disease. Probably it is laryngotracheitis, tracheitis, which itself is a disease leading to severe persistent bouts of cough. So use a combination of inhaled corticosteroids with inhaled bronchodilators for 2 to 3 weeks, and definitely they will show a good improvement. In such a situation, even levochloroperazine, which is a cough suppressant, along with the inhalers, will definitely show a good difference in the symptomatic improvement. Please, in all these patients, we have to consider reflux, because that is a very, very common presentation, common cause rather. It may not be a upfront symptom given by the patient, but a common cause of such intractable coughs. Any alternate remedy except bronchodilation, I think we have discussed that regarding pulmonary rehabilitation, means the non-pharmacological treatment aspects in terms of COPD would be only related to that. And what is the best and the latest approach in treatment for COPD patients for the rich as well as the poor patients? So as a doctor, naturally there is nothing which is very, very specific for rich as well as the poor, but we can say that we need to be using anticholinergic bronchodilators in COPD patients. The age-old anticholinergic bronchodilator was ipratropium. It is still available. I suppose it would be, in terms of the poor and the rich, maybe you may use it, but it needs to be used thrice a day compared to tiotropium. And of course, theophylline. Theophylline have always been a drug which is used in COPD patients because of multiple actions which we know about: the diaphragmatic contractility, the ionotropic effect, the anti-inflammatory effect. So we have got different forms of theophyllines, right from different acebrophylline is available, doxophylline is available. So these are few therapies which have been accepted and which have been shown to be useful in terms of managing our patients of COPD. Yes, antidepressants have shown to be useful, especially because our patients have depression and anxiety problems. So even nortriptyline has been used. They are supposed to be safe in terms of COPD patients, but if you ask me, I have not used nortriptyline as a specific drug for COPD management, but reports and case reports have shown that it is being used in certain group of patients. So I suppose we have now tried to finish most of the aspects of treatment of a COPD patient. Please remember, the most dreaded complication of a COPD patient, other than type 2 respiratory failure, is also pneumothorax. Because a COPD patient, especially an emphysematous patient, may come with a severe attack of breathlessness, and the cause of which could be a pneumothorax. And it's a little difficult to identify only clinically, because a hyperresonant note is present by and large in a patient with an emphysematous barrel-shaped chest. So a X-ray chest becomes very important in these patients, and acute exacerbation, acute breathlessness, we need to consider pneumothorax unless the patient is bedridden because of his disability, and that has given rise to a pulmonary embolism. So I am stopping this session at this, because we have covered all the aspects of management of COPD, and please understand that symptomatic relief is the goal at this moment. The basic symptomatic treatment, symptomatic relief in terms of use of a cough syrup, cough expectorant should be used, and I am certain that you have used different kind of formulations and treatment strategies, and would be the wisest clinicians to treat your patients of COPD. Any more questions? Okay, what is the incidence of, one question is come, what is the incidence of pleural effusion in a established case of COPD? So it would not be related to COPD, obviously, because COPD and pleural effusion are two different diseases. So a COPD patient developing a pneumonia, then developing a pneumonic effusion, is not directly connected to COPD per se. Yeah. And how to treat smoker's cough? As the question itself says, the smoker's cough is treated only by quitting smoking. That is the basic principle on which it rests. Otherwise, there is nothing like a symptomatic relief unless he keeps on smoking. Any cough suppressant will have only a temporary symptomatic relief, but it's going to come back because the smoke is going to be the irritant factor. Are bronchodilators of any use in a chest having mainly crepitations and without any wheezing? So a patient, even if we are talking of COPD, a COPD patient having emphysema, means primarily emphysema, the clinical sign could be only crepitations, because there is an airway dilatation caused by the elastic recoil being lost. So they may present with only crepitations, but may not be audible wheezing present. And in such patients, of course, anticholinergic bronchodilators have shown to improve the lung functions and improve the vital capacities. So yes, we should be using them as much as possible, and the guidelines, I think, clears up quite a few misunderstandings about treatment of COPD. Home oxygen therapy is one part which has to be thought of, because certain COPD patients whose saturation, basal saturation, remains around 88 to 89%, they need to be put on long-term home oxygen therapy, because it will help him improving the quality of life, plus preventing the onset of pulmonary hypertension and cor pulmonale and right ventricular hypertrophy. So the right time to start home oxygen therapy is also a very, very important aspect in terms of treatment of a patient with a COPD. So I think that would be one or two last questions we will take. Okay, so my peak flow is 400 ml, age 48, weight 95 kg, not a smoker, and has COPD or not. So peak expiratory flow rate, as it suggests, it's basically telling you about the narrowing in the airways. So a non-smoker with this particular peak flow, we cannot label it as COPD. COPD has a specific definition. Okay, one peak flow reading, just saying that he's got a peak flow of 400 is not suggestive of a COPD patient. We need to have a complete history. We need to have repeated peak flows. Peak flows are primarily to know the diurnal variations, the airway hyperreactivity. Okay, so if we have to decide about COPD, we should not be banking only on one peak expiratory flow rate reading and concluding that this patient is having chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So cough means asthma or COPD. How to differentiate? So asthmatics have sudden episodes of breathlessness, sudden episodes of attacks of breathlessness. Once that attack is treated, they become asymptomatic. And again they get symptoms when they are exposed to a particular allergen. So they have got a peak attack, then they come back to a baseline where they become asymptomatic. That is an asthmatic. Whereas a COPD patient will have cough and breathlessness, he will get treated, but his symptoms never come to baseline. He remains better but not asymptomatic. And that better will continue. Again he will have an exacerbation. So there is a peak and trough in an asthmatic. There is a peak in an exacerbation of COPD but never comes down to a baseline. So that's how a life of a COPD patient will continue. Okay, thank you very much. I thank Vocard again for inviting me today for this webinar, and I hope I have been able to convey most of the thoughts and the questions which you have asked. I hope I have been able to answer most of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It has been so. As I remember, sir was my teacher in UG. Also, he used to teach the same way, and he used to clear all my doubts. Thank you so very much for giving us the time. Now, I would like our marketing head, Mr. Shailendra, to give the word of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Rohit, and thank you, Dr. Bendre.
Thank you.
And I think it was a fantastic, full pack information on COPD. And it was just like everything what you spoke about the COPD was very essential, and I'm sure you would find this very useful in your clinical practice as well. This is our baby step what we have taken at Vocard. Always it has been our endeavor to come out with such academic sessions to enhance your clinical practice. I'm sure this is going to be helpful to you. Please look forward for some same sessions. Do give us your feedback. And I sincerely thank you very much for finding out times in between your clinical practice, coming and attending this session. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks.